War, inflation and stock market uncertainty, and all after a global pandemic. It's no surprise that you feel uneasy about the future. There's so many things out of your control, but your finances do not need to be one of them. Since 2016, we've helped people just like you to secure their finances in gold and silver outside of the banking system, so that they don't get battered by the financial storm that isn't going to end anytime soon. Precious metals are in demand more than ever before as people realise how financially vulnerable they really are. Our message is simple. Don't wait. Don't be at the back of the line. Visit goldbusters.co.uk and see how we can help you today.
Well, welcome back, Susan Price. Great to see you again.
Thank you, Charlie. Great to be here.
And today we've got Colonel Mike Mccalister with you. A real pleasure to see you again. How are you?
Hey, great. Glad to be on your show, and we can have a chance today to share some knowledge and information that will be of value to your audiences.
Yeah, for sure. And for those people, Colonel Mike Mccalister has worked in the U.S. military from right at the bottom right to the very top. And we were just talking because he was giving me an understanding of what a colonel is. And maybe you can share that with my audience so that they understand your journey, where you've been, and enlighten them.
I'm sure you have a lot of military veterans in there. You know, the military, you have the enlisted ranks, which are really the backbone of the military. That, you know, and I was a private. I started out as a private, then I went to officer candidate school later. But you have the privates, you have the enlisted men, you have and then the NCOs, the sergeants, and they have several ranks of sergeants, and they basically run the Army or the Air Force or the Navy or the Marines or the Coast Guard on a day-to-day basis. They're the tactical level, get things done, make things happen. The officer corps, you know, you start out and you're commissioned by the U.S. government, and you start out as a second lieutenant, and then you become a first lieutenant, then a captain. Now, this is the Army and Air Force and Marine ranks. The Navy has a little different name, but it's the same pay grades. And then after major, you make lieutenant colonel, and then you become a full colonel, which at that time, anything that's full colonel and above, when you get chosen, those require U.S. Senate confirmation. So it gets a little tougher there, and it gets a little bit political there. And then as we were talking, when you become a general, which I did not, I never made general, but when you get to the higher ranks of general, 3 and 4 stars, those are chosen pretty selectively by the Secretary of Defense and the President. So they kind of get to pick the senior leadership of the military. And obviously they're going to put people in those positions that are going to support their agenda. And then that's where it gets a little difficult. Even though all commissioned officers take an oath to protect and defend the Constitution, when you get to the very top level, that's the guy that can fire you. So that's where you start getting, you know, and at the 4-star level, for lack of a better term, is kind of an interface between the military and the civilian government officials that you serve, which is the Secretary of Defense under Goldwater Nichols and the President. They're the only two that can actually move forces into combat mode. So, you know, the presidents come in and they obviously have watched history and seen history that I don't want to have a military coup, so I better choose my own guys to be at the top to make sure that don't happen. Well, then you have a carryover from one administration to the other. It's not like all the generals, like some of the cabinet positions, they don't submit a letter of resignation because you get a new president. But they can be told it's time for you to retire, so you put some new people in. But any president that wants to make sure that he's got a military that's going to do their job and support his agenda is going to pick his guys at the very top. And then if you have a president that's not supporting the Constitution and not looking out for the best interests of American people, he's going to pick generals at the very top to do what he wants. And that's where we have a problem, Charlie.
Yeah, exactly right. We've seen that, haven't we, over the last few years, where the different administrations move different people in the right places to support them. And I suppose it's only human nature. And this is why it becomes, because in human nature, we'd like to have people that have our back
Yes.
Now, if we're dirty, we need extra protection. But if you're a good leader, then you want good people around you. And this is what we've seen. We've seen good leaders with good people behind them, and we've seen bad leaders with bad people behind them. And you couldn't get two more different administrations than we've just seen in the last 10, 15 years. One is clearly has one agenda and one clearly has another. It's the difference between good and evil, God and Satan, whatever you want to call it. But it's been very, very defined. And at the moment, we're going through one of the most incredible periods of history, as in Donald Trump's own words, he's draining the swamp. The swamp was incredibly dirty, and it's not just the halls of power. It's also in the military, because they're all interlinked, as you said. You know, they're handpicked at the top level to look after the agenda. Not that what the oath says is to serve and protect, and to align themselves with the Constitution, to serve and protect the Constitution.
Well, and Charlie, and if you look around, it's global, but
Yes.
we see it here in America. We feel it. Every system is breaking down.
Yeah, it is.
You have your banking, your schools, your communities, your food, everything. I mean, the atrocities and tragedies and the COVID started it. It started that was the narrative that was used, along with what happened during the election time. It was stolen.
Yeah.
And I mean, Colonel can elaborate further, but for the average person that connects the dots and thinks critically, you can see it. It's everywhere.
And, you know, Charlie, to add on to what you were saying, and Susan, I was at an event just a couple of weeks ago up in the Villages, Florida, which is, you know, kind of a conservative stronghold, a big retirement community in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And the speakers were Roger Stone, General Mike Flynn, and myself.
Mm-hmm.
And without, you know, putting words in anyone's notes, but I can tell you that some of the things that were identified and talked about during that event was that this has been a very longer term than we realized, well orchestrated and organized effort to take over America. And it was a matter of taking over certain institutions here, starting with education, healthcare, and of course, the military.
Yeah.
And when you start looking, if you can control what the children are being taught, if you can control what people's health care is, you know, that as they age, that becomes a bigger issue. And of course, the military. And they were able to be, you know, more successful than what we would like at infiltrating and becoming the dominant force in those key institutions. And then you throw on top of that, for what information the public gets, they threw in mainstream media and of course big tech. So now you're controlling healthcare, you're controlling education, you're controlling what people see and hear. You know, you think back to Nazi Germany with Joseph Goebbels. First thing Hitler did was put him in his propaganda ministry, and they seized the newspapers and the radios. They didn't have TV then, but newspapers, radios, and movies, and basically said, this is what you're going to say. Well, that's what we have today. Mm-hmm. So the people, you know, and it's even the same way. They've got teams that post things online, or, you know, that sort of get Google searches, and everyone thinks they're getting quality research, but it's an art and a science that's well defined, that's well proven. And they have been very, very organized and efficient in this, to control what your kids are taught, to control what information you get, to control how your healthcare goes. And then they, you know, to keep the military from saying, wait a minute, this is no longer in support of our Constitution, starting with the First Amendment, freedom of speech. Well, we'll control the military by picking the top levels. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what we're up against. Now, you have the rank and file in the military and in the FBI and in other organizations that are seeing what's going on. And this was not the design and the intent of our founding fathers. Mm-hmm. So this is a battle on all fronts, so to speak, Charlie. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It is a battle on all fronts. And even though we're in the midst of one of the most incredible battles ever, that nobody's using guns, nobody's using rocket launchers, but they are using needles. It's a different kind of warfare than we've ever been used to. There's so much that's going on right now. It's very, very important that the people understand what truth is, because you're absolutely right. The narrative has been completely controlled, as it was in Germany during the Second World War and through periods of time. And the one thing that's become, it was a bit of a shock to me to find that the people I'd looked up to who I thought were intelligent actually turned out not to be that intelligent. And those that I looked at as being just normal folk actually got it really quickly because they have what's called common sense. I just think that whoever the military minds who put this plan together, I'd love to meet them all and just shake their hand. One very interesting thing from a military point of view, I was told back in June 2020, I was inquiring about William Barr. And the military man I spoke to said, oh, ignore William Barr. Keep your eyes on a guy called John Durham. And that's my military man. I'd never heard of John Durham in those days, not in June 2020. And now I sit back and go, and this is what I explain to people about truth. Truth is everything that's happened up until right now. What happens this afternoon, this evening, speculation. Don't know. I'm guessing this, I'm guessing that, but the truth is everything that's happened up until right now. And what I'm trying to do is base my judgment on truth and trying to speak the truth, trying to locate the truth, trying as best as I can to find the truth. And it comes from going back to the same people that gave you the truth that's been tested. And that's what I've been doing.
And Charlie, thank you for your broadcast, because shows like yours and other media, this is the real media, the citizens, journalists, broadcasters, people like Colonel Mike Mccalister, who's been out there as a servant, working in political realms and in the trenches with very important people. He's lived it. And I'm just a citizens journalist myself for 13 years, reporting on what's going on and meeting people, working behind the scenes. But it's a culmination of all of us, truth seekers and dragon slayers, coming together, because our media globally they're satanically ruled. They're the enemy, and warfare is sophisticated. It's weaponized weather, it's weaponized food and drugs and everything. And now it's all crashing down. So we need all of us as a culmination. And I'm grateful to know Colonel Mike Mccalister, because he's a hero here in the state of Florida and well-known patriot to many up higher echelon. So thank you so much for allowing us this platform.
Yeah, and I tell you, Charlie, to kind of add to what you were saying about Durham and Barr, Barr, at one time was the Attorney General under a previous administration, and then they brought him back, so he wasn't new, which, as we know, is good and bad. So, but you bring up Durham, and the key, I think, right now is when he was trying Sussman, who was the, I guess, lead counsel for Hillary Clinton's campaign, that actually walked the phony dossier over to the FBI to his buddy, who at the time was the general counsel for the FBI, who then left that job, by the way, and went over and became general counsel for a major social media company. And so that story has a few more twists to it. But they knew that this trial is going to take place in D.C., and you had a bunch of Hillary Clinton donors and supporters. So I think they knew they may not win that first round, but it started the process of discovery at a much higher level. And so, so when you start looking at, well, where will he go next? And the thing we want to watch here a little bit, and what I'm afraid the bad guys are going to try to count on is statute of limitations coming in on what some of these wrongdoings were. So I'm sure if they can prove treason, or which when you start looking at trying to take down an existing government that is treason.
Yeah.
And that is a serious crime in this country. I mean, it's about as serious as it gets, that and murder. So yeah. I don't know where they're going to be able to get with that, but you bring up a great point that with Durham, he, unlike the U.S. Congress, is a prosecutor and an investigator. He is in the Department of Justice, which, you know, runs the FBI and oversees the court system. So he knows the game. And from what I'm hearing, and again, we'll see how it plays out. But me and you were talking earlier that part of this whole January 6th circus that's going on is where the U.S. Congress is trying to become the role of investigator and jury. And that is a violation of our separation of powers. They want to take the limelight off of the real criminal investigation, which is being done by Durham on trying to take down a president. And of course, big media is supporting the narrative of, well, look at January 6th. The problem is the U.S. Congress has no prosecutorial powers. They are not a judge and jury, and they are not a part of the FBI that investigates crimes against our government. So, I think that's a distraction, and you pointed it out. We throw a hand grenade over here. Well, that's what that is. That's trying to take the public's view off of the real criminal investigation, which is being conducted by Durham. So you make a great point there.
Yeah, I was told very, very clearly before the case was over that Durham was playing this to get everything on record. He didn't intend to win this one. And he didn't push, and this was the critical thing. At the start of the case, he didn't push for recusal, which I now learn is the removal of the judge.
Yes.
And there was 7 different reasons why he should be removed. The first one was that both Chris Cooper and Sussman are personal friends, professional friends. That was number one. The second one is his wife represented former FBI lawyer Lisa Page. The third one was Cooper and his wife were married by Merrick Garland. The fourth one was Cooper was appointed by Obama. The fifth one was the judge's wife. So Chris Cooper's wife, lawyer, is Lisa Page's lawyer. Number 6 is one of the jurors' children, and Sussman's children are in the same rowing team.
Yes.
And the 7th one is multiple jurors are Clinton Foundation donors and supporters. There was absolutely no chance of a conviction, but the case was put together to get everything on record in DC.
Yes.
So it was a master chess move by Durham to let them think they'd got away with it. And it's only after the case they realized what Durham had done. He didn't want the conviction there. He wanted everything on record.
Yes. Yes.
Because he can then use it.
I mean, when you start looking at a little bit of the audit trail here, you had the Hillary campaign that hired, Sussman to be the lead counsel in his law firm. And then they go and they hire these guys over at Fusion GPS to gather dirt. And then they hire the guy to put together the phony dossier. But then, during the process of that, the FBI became aware that the dossier, because the guy that put it together told him, we were having beers one night and we made this all up. So the FBI said, well, we don't want to hear that. We're still going to take it. And they kind of doctored it up a little bit and took it to the FISA court to get the warrants to spy on a presidential candidate and who then became the president. So when we start looking, I mean, that is treason.
It is.
So you make some great points, and this movie ain't over.
Nowhere near.
We have to make sure it doesn't get called on account of darkness or anything, like with a statute of limitations somewhere, which I think is a part of the defense's strategy. So let's see if we can just, string this along to the point that they run out of time. But yeah, you're right, Charlie.
I was told behind the scenes that everything, Charlie, has now been done. Everything is done. And what we're now seeing is the pantomime, probably a year, 18 months after it actually happened, we're seeing it play out now. But all of the arrests have been done. All of the cases have been heard in Guantanamo Bay and in other military tribunals. But we're now catching up. It's like watching a box series on Netflix, I think, at the moment. Our lives are at the moment, because what's playing out right now has already happened 18 months, and sometimes a lot further back than that right now. It's now coming into the public domain, and we're starting to see it all now in plain sight.
And you make great points again. And the thing that your listeners and all of us are aware of is the mainstream media it's not the news. They are absolutely a political commentary that has one agenda in mind, and that's the left. And they're constantly trying to now spin that well, look, Sussman was dismissed, so obviously there was nothing here. Well, that was just one little piece, like you said, that Durham probably knew he wasn't going to win that one because of the court in DC and how it was stacked and the components of it. But that game's not over, like you said. And the media is trying to spin that and then switch everybody's attention over to the January 6th committee in the Congress, who again is not a part of the Justice Department. They're not federal prosecutors. They're not federal investigators, and they're certainly not judge and juries. So that's where but they're trying to take everybody's eye off of that, which is what they always do with the mainstream media. We look at the illegal immigration a couple of years ago when President Trump was still the president. I got asked by some of his people at the White House to go to the border. So I went, and they took about 30 or 40 of us down there from around the country to see the real truth of what's going on. And it was a little bit of an eye opener. You get down to the southern border. Now, why does this matter? Because they're letting through enough people illegally so that they can then continue to build their voter base. That's the end goal in all of that. But what the media doesn't tell anybody, and again, for all the public, it's unfortunate that they control the information that you can get, is the drug cartels bought a lot of the property on the south side of the border, and this is a human trafficking operation. Yeah. So they brought us in a room. They brought in at the time who was the head of the Border Patrol. It was a lady at that time, and then her boss, who was the Undersecretary of Homeland Security, put us in a room and briefed us on what was going on. And it was really so different than what we see generally, even on social media or on mainstream media. They had at that time, they called them OTMs, other than Mexican. 93% of the people coming through the border were not Mexican, which is certainly not what they make it sound like. So you've got the drug cartels renting children to people to get them through and then loading them down with drugs. That, obviously Biden stopped the construction on the wall, and everyone says, well, the wall didn't work. The whole idea of the wall, according to what the Border Patrol told us, is to just direct the illegal immigration to the points where they wanted it to go.
All right.
But, the whole thing with the southern border, it was driven. I mean, they had these big cells in Guatemala. So they would transport these people there, just dump them at the border. They know our laws. They rent them a child to get them across. And what we have to be fearful is if once they're here illegally, now they're dispersing them among voter swing states where they want them to go. You do have in our state, the governor, DeSantis, and even in Texas, Governor Abbott, they are fighting back now, and they're putting them on buses when they bring them in, because they were shipping them in to states at night on airplanes. Well, the federal government controls the airports. But once they leave the airport property in these buses, the governors were able to redirect that and send them to either DC or to Delaware, which is the home state of President Biden. So at least there is some pushback going on there. But the terminology they're saying is every state's a border state now, because the federal government is transporting these illegal immigrants to different states. And again, the first thing that'll happen then is they get a driver's license, and then some states are trying to make it where if you have a driver's license, you can vote. So we really need to understand this is all another way to control our elections in the future. And when you look at the election fraud that took place, in swing states, there's a major city that can phony enough ballots to swing a statewide race. So yeah, Charlie, you make a lot of good points. There's so many fronts to this battle, and they all have to be taken on.
Very much so. And they are being taken on. I've been working with the quantum team now for some time. and understanding, like they watched live on the new quantum voting system. They actually watched the real time the whole way through the election, and they saw everything. But because the new quantum voting system was not official and not in use, they couldn't use that as evidence. So they had to go and find the evidence, like Dinesh D'Souza has done with 2,000 Mules.
Mhm.
So it's very much like we're going through the same as what we went through with Julian Assange and Edward Snowden, where they got the evidence, WikiLeaks, they got it through the back door. That was very, very kind of them, but it would be easy to dismantle that in a court of law. So they had to go through the front door to get it. They knew it was there. They knew where it was, even though certain members that will remain nameless tried to destroy all of the evidence. I mean, Hillary Clinton must be incredibly stupid to think that just deleting her emails off her laptop would save it. But she obviously doesn't understand servers and how they work, because it would take an average computer guy no more than 10 minutes to find them. But this is the arrogance of them, and this is what's caught them out this time. They never thought they'd get caught.
No, they didn't, and they thought they could control the whole system because they were controlling the Justice Department, which was the FBI, and of course, you know, the Attorney General. That they had all these safety nets in place. That, you know, and then if somebody starts getting a little close, then we'll go start investigating them.
Yep.
I mean, when I look at Roger when he got arrested, you know, at his home with 20 heavily armed FBI agents at 6 in the morning. It's like he says, "Hey, why didn't you just, you know, call me? I'd come in and talk to you or whatever." I mean, Charlie, look what happened a week ago up in Michigan, a key swing state in America, where they sent the FBI in and shackled the Republican candidate for governor who's leading in the polls.
Yep.
The leading candidate for governor tied him to the January 6th thing. They're using the January 6th phony made up riot as this coverall, this, you know, one check pays all bills to go after anybody, whether you were there or not, whether you did anything wrong or not. And that's the highest I've seen this going. But if they're not going to stop there, they're afraid they'll lose the governorship of Michigan. The guy was leading the incumbent Democrat by 4 points. So they said, well, let's go take him out. So this is serious. But people, you know, all they see, oh, well, he did these, he was there on January the 6th and a part of the terrorist ride. So yeah, we can't have him in, because that's how they taint it. That's how they paint it. They spin it. And then this is what's all over the media all the time.
Yeah. And we're starting to see it, because the truth currently stands out as polar opposite to what's going on. So it's very clear now. And I often think about, especially when we get trolled or get verbal threats or what have you, I often think about Donald Trump, how much he's kept his humility through the amount of death threats, the amount of lies, fabricated stories, fabricated evidence. I mean, that's one hell of a man, or one heaven of a man, I should say. An incredible human being that has taken so much. And I've watched on this journey many truthers just fall away because they can't handle the trolls, and all these trolls are paid for by the deep state, the cabal. They're all pathetic little people who sit in dark rooms and, you know, pick holes in anybody rather than being constructive. Go out and be constructive and find out some truth. Then you'll have a value.
Charlie, I can tell you that when Colonel Mike ran for office, you know, agriculture commissioner, we saw a lot of what was going on behind the scenes, and you know, he couldn't be bought. But there are people that take money from these organizations, and then they have to pay them favors back once they get into office. And Colonel Mike if you would elaborate for a moment about how important the agriculture commissioner is, especially in the state of Florida, with the gun rights, what goes on
Yeah.
there.
Well, and here in Florida, and we're the third largest state in America now, somewhere between 21, 22 million people, a very fast growing state, a state that our sitting governor, Ron DeSantis, is taking a lot of strong stands. He's not a person to be easily bullied. Well, in the state of Florida, you have the state legislature, and those are part-time people. And then you have a Florida cabinet, which are all elected statewide, all 67 counties. And there's 4 of them, and they basically are the cabinet for the state. It's the governor, the commissioner of agriculture, the attorney general, and the chief financial officer. And the reason I ran for commissioner of agriculture was, again, a statewide position on the Florida cabinet, but it oversees the energy. It oversees the weights and measures, which includes the gas pumps. It oversees all food safety, oversees agriculture. It has a big impact on water. So we start, and it's the office that issues the concealed weapon permits. Mm-hmm. So when they run the school lunch programs, and then of course there's other things. They oversee the forestry department. But I saw that you're controlling, the gun permits, so that those don't get shut off. You're overseeing the energy, so that's people's homes and their vehicles, food. So you're talking about food, water, weapons, and energy, and those are all key things. And it was really sad. I lost that race in the primary to someone that had been backed by a lot of this establishment money. Mm-hmm. And then he lost in the general election to a very liberal who it was now overseeing all those different aspects that are just the foundation and the core of American citizens' day-to-day life. Mm-hmm. And that's really sad. And a lot of people don't realize that, but this is what, and the liberals have done a great job on the school boards in our state too, Charlie, where they put a big emphasis on getting people elected to the school boards. And now it's at a point where you can't even go up and see what's going on in the classroom where your first grader or your second grader or your third grader is being educated. So I taught college for years. I have a PhD, I have a doctorate in management. I taught grad school for years. And you go to the universities and you see, the education departments are very liberal, and liberal, not just universities liberal, but the education department is very liberal. So, they have the teachers are coming out with a liberal education, and they control the school boards or who is providing the cover for them, where you as a parent are not even basically allowed to know what's going on in the classroom. And then they start infiltrating and imposing their liberal agenda, teaching third graders about sex and about gender identity, and taking away the Pledge of Allegiance because they don't want anybody to know we are a republic and not a parliamentary democracy. So they've been very, very, very targeted, very effective, very comprehensive about infiltrating the entire American way of life. And it shows like yours that help get the real word out. And my hat's off to you and your listeners for staying in this fight.
Well, it's very interesting what you say there, because there's been a survey that was done. What percentage do you think of 4-year-old children are on the edge of genius?
I wouldn't know.
98%. Now, move that on through schooling, college, university, 25 years old. What percentage of 25-year-olds are verging on the edge of genius?
25%.
Probably about 10, maybe 10 or 5.
2%.
Oh, Lord. Wow.
So it tells you the educational system is taking geniuses and turning them into
the dumbing
workers
down
and robots.
Yeah.
That's a classic study in dumbing down of America.
That's exactly what's happening. It's not just America, it's every country in the world. Yeah. And this is why the Rockefellers put $150 billion into the education system so that they could control the worldwide narrative for education.
Yeah.
Yep. And what's sad is the mainstream media is never going to let that out.
No, of course they're not.
And you try to post things like that on social media, and they'll pull it down and say it goes against our community standards.
Yeah.
That's why I guess a lot of the left is just panicked about Elon Musk buying Twitter back, because he has said, I'm going to allow true freedom of speech.
Mhm.
And they're beside themselves because, you know, if they can control what you see on TV or hear on the radio, and then they control what you even put on your own social media page. And it's shows like yours that are that get around that type of censorship and liberal and radical liberal control, where they just want to control the minds. If they can control the knowledge and the information that you receive, then they're controlling your mind, whether you realize it or not. And it's been a comprehensive, intentional, well-organized and orchestrated plan to take over people's independence, their freedom, the freedom of speech. And it's at the point really where it's freedom of thought.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Well, you could even see it in the music industry and with movies, the movie industry as well. A lot of the great jazz musician stations have disappeared over the last decade, and just the movies as well.
Well, there's something that was pointed out to us only the other day. It was in the mainstream as well, which shocked us. They put out there that a lot of the musicians today have been created in the clone laboratory of Disney. So we're seeing singers that are just clones. They're not real people. They're clones that have been created in Disney's laboratories. I mean, they're openly admitting this. And this is why the standard of music is only as good as the people that are trying to create digital music. A bit like Simon Cowell is doing.
Yeah.
And like Stock Aitken and Waterman did 20 years ago. It becomes plastic pop. It's just, it's all created. And, there's nothing better. This is why I love things like country music in America, because it's very earthy, it's very natural. And there are certain types of music that are exactly that. Yesterday we were at a party and they had a gospel choir singing there. That sort of music is just so natural and beautiful and so polar opposite to what's coming out of this manufactured pop world.
Well, getting back to Disney, we've seen and heard many nefarious activities with Disney, including human child trafficking. But and DeSantis was reeling that in. Our governor was with his agenda. So Disney now is not the same Disney, and there's lots of families taking a second look at that, and it's right in our backyard. The Colonel and I live not far from Disney. Yeah,
they're right there where you're going to be in Orlando.
Yeah,
they're right
exactly.
there.
Yeah. And they have their own government. They had their own police force.
They do.
I mean, it's unbelievable who gave that much power to these people.
Well, they need to, because there's 2 children go missing every single day in Disney Orlando. Every single day, 2 children go missing. So they needed control. They needed the police control. They needed all of this control. Otherwise, they'd never got away with it.
Yeah.
Now they will be exposed. And it's long, long, long overdue.
Yep.
Definitely.
Yep.
Well, it's been a real pleasure having you both on here, Susan. And obviously, Colonel Michael Mccalister, a real pleasure to see you again. And I look forward to seeing you again very, very soon as we continue this journey. Roger's on a flight at the moment, so we've missed him today. But I look forward to seeing you again very, very soon.
Thank you so much. And for all the great work you're doing. It's really doing a great service and value to your listeners to get the truth out there.
I thank you for that. I thank you.
God bless you, Charlie. Thank you.
God bless you too.
See you later, Charlie.
See you later.